So maybe you could tell a little bit what made you start the company and how you got here, because it seems like it's a really cool place and it's a way for us to really have a conversation about what's going on in the job market.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is. It is a cool place. I agree. Look, we started Greenhouse in 2012. Um, what we were hearing over and over again from leaders in almost every type of company was two very different things. On the one hand, they were saying people are our most important asset. Talent is super critical to the business. We need to hire the right people if we're gonna succeed is critical. And on the other hand, they would say hiring is hopeless. We can't do it. Stinks. Nothing's working. I was like, okay, hang on. This is like the top priority and the bottom capability at most companies. And I had had the privilege of seeing what great hiring looks and feels
Mhm.
like, and I knew it was very different than what's happening in most companies. And at the same time, that kind of what it takes to be really good at hiring are things that most any company can do.
Mhm.
You just have to be a little bit, you have to go about the work a little bit differently. And so the idea with Greenhouse was, hey, if we can help every company work differently in how they hire, be more planful, be more fair, use data and technology more effectively, that they can realize one of the most important priorities for every business, which is to compete and win for top talent and to do it efficiently and predictably. That seems like a really valuable problem to solve. It seems like a really meaningful mission to be on. And so that was the inspiration for why we started this business.
And when you say what are some good ways to hire people? Because it seems that a lot of companies aren't having good ways because so many people complain about the onboarding, they complain about the ATS system, they complain about the getting ghosted. So how can companies have like a great way to embrace candidates and get them through the whole interview process and make them feel good about it?
Yeah, do you know the way I think about it is like lots of parts of business are hard,
Mhm.
but people don't talk about them in the same helpless way that they talk about hiring. Nobody goes like, "Man, it's really tough out there for you can't sell anything, there's no customers." Like, no, selling is competitive, it's challenging,
Right.
but there's a discipline to it. You show up every day, and you run your sales process and it's competitive and it's hard, but you get results. And I think the reason why hiring feels so helpless is because people don't have that process, and so there's no hard work to do. It just feels
Mhm.
like, what are you going to do? And like it turns out, when you look at companies that succeed at hiring, there's a lot of very straightforward ways to systematize your approach to hiring. When you do those things, then it becomes like every other part of your business. Sure, it requires being good at it, it requires focused effort, but you don't feel this helpless. You don't feel like you're kind of adrift. You feel like it's good work to be doing. And so what does that look like? Well, it starts when you open up a job. I think too often when a company opens up a job, they don't put a plan in place for how they're going to find the person, how they're going to interview and assess the right candidates, and then how they're going to go ahead and make an offer that's going to be fair and going to be accepted. But if you skip that step, then you're kind of adrift. On the other hand, if you make that plan up front, if you put in a good structured process, you say, okay, we're going to interview for these handful of skills, and here's the questions that we're going to ask every candidate, the same questions. Here's who on our team is going to participate, what their role is, and then here's how the process is going to work. Well, then everything else gets set up for success. And so that's more than anything what it looks like when hiring is set up for a good outcome.
Now, what happens on the other side of the coin when you have the bad stuff with, ghost jobs and other things that kind of drive everyone crazy a little bit?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying the job market right now is probably one of the worst that I've seen. Um,
Is it so starting when? Because that's like I hear from so many people feeling that way. And then what we were talking a little bit before we
mm,
just went live is that you think it's just you that's going through it. But when you start talking, everyone says, "Oh, I've gone through this too." So why, when you say it's the worst, starting when? Was it like this
yeah,
last year
it's almost
or?
like it's almost like the universe is gaslighting you when you're in that position. You open up the newspaper and you're like, oh, unemployment is low and inflation's coming down,
Yes.
wages are up. I think those kind of large headlines that we see
Mhm.
that's reflective of like other trends that don't really show up in particularly in technology and kind of technology adjacent other types of white collar jobs. It reflects a lot of, to be fair, real stuff in government, healthcare, some services jobs, some hospitality jobs, where it is quite different. But if you think about it through the lens of I had a tech job, things were great, now it feels really bad, like you're definitely not alone. And really, when that reset was in late 22, when interest rates came off the floor, interest rates had
Mhm.
been basically zero for a decade, and all of a sudden they spiked up in that kind of post-COVID rebound. And that really set the stage for a wave or successive waves of layoffs in the tech industry, followed by a period of really cost rationalization, which really results in a lot of scrutiny around hiring and salaries, particularly in tech and tech adjacent industries that we're still in. So that's one big thing that happened. Is it
Mhm.
just got the job market got a lot more constrained in that part of the world. The second thing that happened at the same time, but for completely different reasons, is it got easier and easier to apply for jobs. And so people are applying for more and more jobs than they ever used to. And so just at the same time when the jobs themselves are getting more scarce, the number of job applications is going up and up. What does that look like? Well, when I graduated college in 1995, I went down to the local
Mm.
Kinko's. I chose ivory paper and a font, and I printed out 20 resumes or whatever, and I put them in envelopes. I sent them out, and that was the extent of what I could do. But today, you can send out hundreds of job applications at the push of a button, all AI assisted, and so it's created this real sea of noise, making it paradoxically harder for any individual person to connect with the right job for themselves. And so the cycle continues because, well, I'll send out more job applications. So that those are some of the trends that are converging right now to create the state that we're in.
And I'd imagine for the mental health of people who are looking for jobs is it's tough because if you go, let's say you go on LinkedIn and you want to apply to a job and you see 500 people, already submitted a resume, and then you're not even sure, did they actually send a resume or they did just click on it or whatever it might be. But then you're like, oh my gosh, what chance do I have when five, six, 700, right? No exaggeration, have already applied.
Yeah.
And then you feel, what do I do now? Like your self-esteem is down, and then you feel like I don't even want to do this anymore, but you have to do it. So what's like, is there any answer to it, or is there some ideas that can make it better? Do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some long-term ways to fix the
Mhm.
market. That doesn't help you if you're a job seeker today. I think if in short term, if you're a job seeker, um, most likely you're feeling, in this part of the market the way that we're talking about. So we recently did a survey of 2,500 job seekers in both the U.S., the U.K., as well as in Germany, and almost 8 in 10 um, within the U.S. were anxious about the market. 90% said the market is challenging, um, and with almost 60% saying it was intensified due to AI. Um, and what does that feel like? Well, it's again this feeling of being lost or adrift in a sea of jobs and job seekers without really having the chance to match with the right job for yourself. So over half of the job seekers in our survey said that finding the right job relevant to their own career skills is the biggest challenge that they're facing. Um, so if you're feeling that way, again, you're not alone. These are not caused by you. These are systematic issues that are caused by these massive trends and forces around us. I think the one thing that's been shown to work more than anything is getting an introduction or a connection directly to an employer. Um, Almost 4 in 10, so about 37% of the candidates that we surveyed are using their network when they're job searching. I think if I had one piece of advice, it's for the other 6 out of 10, do more of that. Because what our data show at Greenhouse, and this is across our network of companies who last year collectively hired about 1.25 million people. So it's a reasonable chunk of data, is despite only representing about 5% of total job applications, referrals made up about 30% of the total hires. So you're much more likely to get a job if you're someone who's referred than if you just show up at the front door and submit your resume on the website.
Do you think there's still this this ick feeling of networking that, it goes back to like you go to some meeting and you have a sticker on there with your name on it and your sweaty palms and you shaking hands, that's 6 out of 10 or whatever it is that don't do it, that they just have this misunderstanding of how this all works. Maybe can you share what you've seen that works in terms of networking? Um,
I think there can be. I mean, I think it's uncomfortable
mhm,
sometimes for people to ask for help. Or
yeah,
as you kind of indicated, it's like feeling like you're selling something somehow or
yeah,
whatever. Plus, I think it's just I think there can be a tendency for people to feel, if they're looking for a job or if they haven't got a job, a sense of shame or a sense of that they're lesser than. So I think those feelings really are out there. What I would say is that just because those feelings exist, that one doesn't have to let them be an obstacle to taking those actions nonetheless. So doing it despite feeling that way is the way forward. Um, and no, I don't think it's like showing up at a mixer with a sticker on and going around and handshaking. First of all, I only think that's people our age that think about that stuff. I don't think.
right, right. I probably shouldn't use that as an example. It kind of ages us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely image resonates with me as well. I don't know that, I think today, like so much stuff happens online.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't already have those connections, um, then you think about how do I build or forge those connections. And the good news about today's world, it is so interconnected, is so transparent that you can do those things. People can navigate on LinkedIn. They can post about
Mhm.
topics they're interested in. They can join online communities and meet other people and talk about these things. And frankly, people just post on the open internet about their job search. I'm looking for a job. Here's what I'm really good at. Here's the things I've already done. Here's the kinds of companies I'm trying. Is there anyone out there that can help me? And I've seen a lot of people, they pick up on those stories, and the next person you meet may not be the person that hires you, um, but they're one introduction closer to getting that job. So it's a numbers game, and you gotta keep it up and go do it. If you are already connected to that company, then it's just simply a matter of getting the right person's attention and delivering the right message, again with a little bit of luck and timing. And so in those cases, I would say, be really strategic in how you approach those organizations. Let's say someone at a company, there's a job there that you think you might be good for. Um, Thinking carefully about, what are you going to say to that person? What's the outreach going to say? And how are you going to do it? One great piece of advice I got early in my career, which I think applies by analogy here, is always, if you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money. That's like the classic, like sales or fundraising. And I think similarly here
Mhm.
in the job market, if you ask for a job, you're going to get advice. But if you ask for advice, often that can lead, into a more productive opportunity to get a job. So you say, hey, look, I'm really interested in your company. I saw this role. How would you suggest I go about it? Is there skills you think I might develop, or are there parts of my resume that you think are really applicable to this role? Like, you can think of a way to frame it as advice seeking to somebody that you already know. And what they'll often think is like, yeah, I can give you advice, but like, I actually think you should apply for that job. That's a great
Mhm.
idea. And then, you're off to the races.
Yeah, what do you think about this? Because oftentimes I'd advise people, and I understand it's not easy, particularly for people who are maybe a little, I don't want to say shy, but they're
Mhm.
not, some people are outgoing extroverts, others not so much perhaps. To find somebody, let's say I want to work at Greenhouse, find someone
Yeah.
like, as you mentioned, go on LinkedIn, go to different, so find people who do you kind of know. First, if you know someone really well, that's great. If not, maybe a loose tie, that's okay. And then share your resume with that person and then beg, plead, what depends how desperate you are for finding that job, to say, hey, can you please get it in front of that right person? Plus a very hearty recommendation so that when someone goes and looks through 500 resumes, they'll say, oh, wait, Jack, came through, Daniel, who we trust Daniel. So, this person must be pretty good. Let's put him to the end, to the top of the funnel to get looked at. Is that something you think would be helpful?
I mean, I think that's kind of what it looks like when it
Mhm.
works. And again, you can't say this enough. Like, it's not easy, and it's, make it sound glib here by saying, "Oh, just
Right.
go network your way in." Like, no, it's super challenging. I have a lot of empathy if you're that person trying to do it. Like, it's it can seem daunting to like hit send on that note. It can feel bad to be in a position of needing or wanting a job. I get all that. It's very, very true. It's very, very real. Um, I would just offer the encouragement that um, that it's the best way, it's the most effective way to do it. And so, despite the fact that it may feel tough and that it's going to result in a bunch of no's and a bunch of ignores, and it's not going to just be a guaranteed success, that is a successful path. But it's not the only path. I think, there's a
Mhm.
lot of people that are, especially in today's tech economy, that are reskilling or upskilling. One of the bad parts about tech is that it's constantly changing. And so the skills that
Mhm.
you've developed come obsolete pretty quickly. But also, that's part of the promise is there's always new skills to develop. And, if you want to be at the forefront of AI, like, there's nobody that's been, working with ChatGPT for 10 years that you have to catch up to because it's all new. And so there's always a novelty to tech that gives people who are hungry, ambitious, and willing to learn, an opportunity to get in on some new area. And whether it's programming, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, all these jobs are changing rapidly. And so developing new skills and finding your way into kinds of jobs that are changing rapidly or that are new, like, that's another way that people are cutting through some of the noise.
What do you see? You must see the craziest stuff from not only from your company, but just in general, being in your industry. Like how what because from ghosting, love bombing, bot versus bot, using AI to put your resume in front of them, and then maybe ATS systems are trying to box that out. Like what
Mhm.
you must see, like what do you see on like on a daily basis that people wouldn't it blow their minds, but then also make them feel like, oh, okay, now I understand it better. Because I to go back to what you were saying, oh, it's not just me. I didn't realize, yeah, this is really crazy.
Yeah, well, you hit on one of the common things that everybody is wondering about, which is this idea of ghosting. That, like, it's one of the most persistent complaints that job seekers have, um, is that they get in somewhere in a job seeking process, and then they just mysteriously never hear back for any reason, even to be told no. Um, it's super frustrating, and it can make you question, what did I do something wrong? Um, is there a problem that I wasn't aware of? Did I miss something in my spam folder? And I guess I'm here to tell you that, we see a huge number of employers um, ghosting candidates, and a huge number of job seekers reporting being ghosted. In our survey, 61% of job seekers reported being ghosted, which is
And
up
what and
9
why do you
points since the spring. So it's happening a ton. And again, part of that is because of the dynamics of the market, and people are getting so many more applications when they open up a role, and their in turn recruiting teams are understaffed as compared to where they used to be. So that's just creating a challenge for them. But also, a lot of organizations, they don't have the operational capability, they don't have the internal rigor, they don't have the technology to make sure that they get back to everyone, regardless of whether they're moving forward or not. And so what they're forced to do is they only prioritize the people they're moving ahead with. So if I want to offer you that next interview or move you forward, I'll reach out to you. But the 15 other people that I met who I'm not moving forward with, they tend to triage them and say, well, I'm not gonna spend time getting back to them. And so it leads to a really horrible experience.
it's a horrible experience for the job seeker, but it also is probably not so great for the PR of the company itself. Because let's say I go through 4 interviews, 5 interviews, put my heart and soul into it, and then I'm ghosted and I don't hear back. I send an email, I send whatever, don't hear back. Then I would probably say to people who ever ask me, hey, Jack, what did you think of company XYZ widget company? I'd say, like, I don't want to talk ill of them, but I would not advise you to send your resume there because it doesn't go well. So it hurts the company as well as the person whose self-esteem and confidence is hurt because they just get ghosted.
Well, we just talked about this a minute
Yeah,
ago about the importance of referrals as a job
yeah,
seeker. Well, the other side of that is if you don't manage a good reputation as an employer, you're not going to receive those referrals as much. So to your point, people are going to steer their friends and coworkers away from you if they're having that bad experience. So just like a product experience, a bad hiring experience has has ripple effects. So that's really the case. Um, and again, it's hard to blame any one actor in this situation when the system is really
yeah,
broken. So, I see it from the perspective of an individual recruiter and how underwater that they are and how challenging it is from their perspective, as I see it from the perspective of a job seeker who feels despair and that the system just doesn't work for them.
what do you think about this theory that I have? And it could, and just to be fair, I'll give it, I'm a cynical New Yorker guy, grew up in New York and Brooklyn, and I think there's something, you become cynical of everything. Could it be in the last few years, just society as a whole is just, people don't seem happy. There's a mental health issue, I think. And it just, it's a vibe that's like, yeah, I'm not going to get back. And not because they're trying to be mean. It's just this feeling of like, I got so much else to do. I'm not going to bother. Where maybe only 5 years ago, you'd find a way to help someone out. Do you think I'm crazy, or is that something that maybe is going on?
Uh, I'm a little skeptical
Okay.
of kind of generational arguments because I feel like every time I hear a generational argument, I just think that's kind of how it's always been.
But I don't
Right?
not, this is just everybody. I'm not even thinking any generation in particular, but like across the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, again, I
Yeah.
think like our parents thought our music was too loud and our, you know, clothing was silly looking, and I think that about my kid.
Yeah.
And so I just think that that kind of stuff is how it always was. So I think people always sort of have this misty
Yeah.
bygone era where neighbors helped each other out, and you could leave your door unlocked. Maybe,
Yeah.
um, but I think there's some more very directly observable things happening
Mhm.
that we can point to and say, well, job applications are up because it's a lot easier than ever before to apply for jobs, and AI is making that worse, or you could say accelerating that. Today I can go out there if I'm a job seeker, find a tool, give it my resume. It will automatically create many versions of that resume, customized to hundreds of jobs, automatically write a cover letter for me to that company, personalized to them, and submit it on my behalf. So, like, definitively, it is a lot easier to apply for jobs, and people are applying for more and
Yeah.
more than they ever used to. And so maybe also like your neighbor used to help you get a job. But mostly I think it's just people are awash in noise because the tools have made that the case. And at the same time, when we look at the economy, it's just a really constricted hiring market, particularly in tech and tech adjacent fields. Um, and so you have fewer people, you have fewer jobs and more job seekers, and that's why it feels that way. And so there might be other causes, and there's always many things that contribute to a situation, but I like to focus on the things that we can do something about, because it gives us a way forward. Well, if those are the challenges, then we can
Mhm.
ask ourselves what could be done about those things and how could we help solve them. And as an entrepreneur, and particularly someone in this field, like, I'm always trying to think about problems through the lens of what actions can we be taking to make the problem better.
So in that vein, what do you have some ideas of different ways that it can improve it? And nothing's gonna be perfect, but at least to start moving that direction.
Yeah, like I said, there's no
Yeah.
short term, I can't flip the
Yeah.
switch tomorrow and fix the thing, or else I would have already done it. But what I can say is that we have a unique perch at Greenhouse into the actual hiring behavior across millions of jobs. And so we see, for example, that across our customer base last year, there were 14.4 million applicants in the second quarter of this year that did not get an email from the employer that they had applied to.
14 million. Wow.
Right? It's a huge number. So
Wow.
okay, so what can we be doing? Well, we can make it way more likely that those employers are going to get back. So we provide tons of automation. we recently released a feature called Greenhouse Verified, which lets employers and hiring managers earn badges for good behavior. So if you're one of those hiring managers that never ghosted a candidate, that always got back to them, I have good news for you. You can now earn a Greenhouse Verified badge that you are communicative. And you can put that badge right up on the jobs page so that applicants can see it. And they know that when they apply to this job, that there is a certification that they're going to get responded to no matter what. They're not going to get ghosted. And I got to say, if I was a job seeker, I would look for those jobs. And if I was an employer and my hiring managers weren't doing that, I'd be all over it. So there's a lot of things that I think we can do now that so much of our work life is governed by software. Everything we do is shaped by the interfaces we deal with. That as a software vendor, we have a responsibility, but we have an opportunity to really change that behavior. So we're thinking about things like Greenhouse Verified, and like the ability to better manage your employee, your job seeker data as a job seeker, as you apply to jobs, as ways to help cut through a lot of that noise and stop the market from being so bad for people. So it'll take time to really grow to the point where it's having meaningful impact on lots of people, but we've already started down that path.
Are there other, I love that idea about the badges, and it holds them accountable as well. So then they don't want, and if they do ghost or do something wrong, you're like, wait a minute, you're the guy who's not supposed to be doing it wrong.
And you
So,
don't, and you don't, it's not a lifetime badge.
yeah, so you have to keep it up. So are there some other things that you feel could be put into place, but it's not going to, like you said, put on the switch and it's going to work,
Yeah,
but just start.
absolutely. I mean, we look at what are the top complaints and challenges that job seekers have, and what are the behaviors that we look at that we affect or control through Greenhouse of hiring managers and teams. And so ghosting is a big one. Another big one is just treating people fairly. People have a suspicion when they go for a job interview, well-founded, by the way, suspicion that there's often not a lot of thought put into the questions. Either I'm being asked questions that have nothing to do with the job, I'm being asked questions that are unfair or even potentially illegal. Sometimes they're just not even paying attention. They're just sort of like chit-chatting with me because they aren't really all that focused. But there's a meaningful portion of employers where they've really put that thought into, here's my structured hiring plan, here are the key skills we're looking for, here's exactly the set of questions we're going to ask and how they relate to those skills. And they deliver a very meaningful, science-based, structured interview process. And so for those hiring managers, they can also earn a badge in Greenhouse because they fill in those scorecards. And so by the time they make a hire, if you're one of those employers that's filled in all your scorecards, and you do that significant amount of the time, you get a badge for that as well. And so as a job seeker, I want to look for jobs at places where I know I'll be evaluated fairly, that they will look at the data and use that to guide decisions. And we've got a badge for that too. So we're starting to see more and more, like in our survey data, the problems that job seekers are facing, the behaviors that employers are exhibiting that cause those problems, and then what we can do to influence or reward the positive behaviors there. I think it's really powerful.
Absolutely. I wonder if you have data on this, because what I've seen anecdotally firsthand, oftentimes someone goes in for an interview and the person who's conducting the interview didn't read the resume, didn't bother looking on LinkedIn or some other social media to see who they're dealing with, then go ask questions, just like the cliche questions, where do you want to be in 5 years? Tell me about yourself. And
what are your
not
greatest
really
strengths and weaknesses, Jack?
exactly, and not drilling into it. And you scratch your head like, all right, how is this really, what are you getting out of these just very basic, boring, bland questions? And then also what I've noticed, and tell me if you've seen this as well, it seems to me, I could be 100% wrong, that oftentimes they'll put somebody into interview, but they don't train that person how to interview. They just believe, oh, okay, because you're a good worker or whatever manager, you know how to interview. But it's not easy to conduct an interview.
Right.
So a lot of times it's very awkward and doesn't turn out well, and not because their person's a jerk, but no one gave the time and effort to train that. Like no one went to train. Hey, let's train Jack Kelly and Daniel, and let's make sure, and Dave and Joe and Bob, and let's make sure they all kind of know. Here are the things you really have to cover. This is what you need to know. This is what you have to be prepared at. But I don't think they do that at a lot of companies, and I wonder if that's one of the reasons. Also, things just get all clogged up. Does that make any sense?
I think that's absolutely
Yeah.
that absolutely happens all the
Yeah.
time. And I guess what I would say is like training is great. And I think,
Hmm.
if you train people in interviewing techniques, like it surely has an impact. At the same time, everybody's busy and has a job to do. And interviewing is often a secondary part of that job. And so in addition to, or instead of, overwhelming people with additional training, what I would offer is show up prepared. That's the ask.
Hmm.
When I come to an interview, I want to have right in front of me at my fingertips, who am I meeting with? Where are they in the process? Who've already met with them? What have they already been asked? What is my job as an interviewer? Like, why am I in this meeting? I'm supposed to ask the following few questions. I'm looking for the following
Hmm.
few characteristics. And here's the data or the form you want me to fill out afterwards. Make that really easy for me as an
Right.
interviewer. And then I'm good, because I'll tell you, like my job, and I'm sure a lot of people's jobs listening to this, I'm in meetings all day. I'm back to back. And when I show up to a candidate, I may have a minute or two before that meeting to get my head in straight. So if I didn't have that right at my fingertips,
Yeah.
I'd be at a loss. But because um, I show up at every interview with a greenhouse interview kit right in front of me, it puts all that at my fingertips, and it's very much like I can just paint by numbers and ask the questions I'm supposed to ask, provide the data back to the hiring team that they're asking for, not, hey, I met this
Hmm.
candidate and he also went to Michigan and loves football, we should hire him. Like, no. So it helps me stay on track. It helps me deliver that experience. And what I hear is like when after candidates interview at Greenhouse, they know that structured hiring process worked. They tell us the questions were on point. They were asked a variety of different questions, not the same thing over and over again from different people. They were relevant to the job. They were fair, and we actually use the answers to those questions to make a hiring decision. That's just unlike so many other places. So it helps the organization make better choices. It gives a better experience to the candidate, but you're really solving an immediate problem for that
Hmm.
interviewer who, to your point, often has gotten no training, doesn't really know how to do it or who they're meeting. And if you can solve their problem, they will deliver that winning interview in the moment. But you have to think about that interviewer's life and what they're
Yeah.
there to do.
Because if they could set it up where, okay, you're going to have, person A starting out the first interview, and this is what they're going to talk about, and let the candidate know what they're going to talk about so they're on the same page. Then have them understand, okay, then now you're going to meet with person number 2 and 3 and 4 and so forth, and why you're meeting these people, and each one researches each other. And I find those will do better than just, having some of these interviews that just don't go anywhere. It gets everyone
It's
frustrated.
honestly, that's what our product does, and it's just that simple. I'll tell you a funny
Mm.
story. Is in the early days when I was pitching Greenhouse
Mhm.
to investors, I'd go out to Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, California, and I would meet with this fancy VC firms, and they would say, "Oh, like, what's your secret sauce?" That was always the question that VCs would ask. What's your secret sauce? And I'll go, "Okay, Ray, I got a secret for you. Write down all the interview questions ahead of time and ask them those questions, and then write down the answers." And then, like, and they would go like, "Well, that sounds obvious." And I would say, "Yeah, I agree. But I'll tell you what, go ask all your portfolio companies you've already invested in if they're doing it today. And if they are, don't call me back." And we raised $110 million of venture capital.
Because
So
sometimes it's just the thing
sometimes the simple thing is the right
it's right.
answer.
The
And
simple, honest, fair, nice way to do things.
to be honest,
Right?
it's very surprising that companies don't normally do it. You
Yeah.
don't need our products to do these things. Anybody
Yeah.
could do it. You could write the questions on a piece of
Yeah.
paper. Um, but companies just to be serious for a minute, you know, companies uh, are led by leaders who often have no experience in these things whatsoever, and they've never
Hmm.
seen it done well. And so if you haven't come out of an organization, been part of an organization that has done this stuff really well, Why should you know it? It's not taught it, they don't teach this stuff in engineering school or in business school, where a lot of those folks come from. Because it's kind of viewed as like, oh, that's HR. It's like, no, 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 this is
Right.
work. This is business. This is a key skill that you need if you're going to build winning teams. Conversely, if you have come out of a company where this is how it works, it's so obvious you can't imagine how anyone else does it. And I've heard that conversation a ton, where if you come out of a company that uses a structured interviewing process and you go somewhere else, you're like, how is any of this going to work? And the answer is, as we've seen by all the data, it doesn't work. So again, if you're thinking, what can I do? If I'm a hiring manager, if I'm listening to this interview and I'm thinking, oh, what could I do about
Hmm.
it? Like, I hope you all buy Greenhouse, but you don't have to. Spend 5 minutes when you open up a job, write down a little scorecard of like, here's the 5 or 6 things we're looking for in this role. For each of those pieces of the scorecard, for each of those skills you need, write an interview question for it. And then hand those, you can do it on Google Docs, you do it on index cards, hand those out to your team, have them ask the same questions to all the candidates. What you'll find is it becomes way easier to evaluate apples to apples. You find diamonds in the rough. You give everyone a fair experience. It's just a better way to do it.
And I know, yeah, you don't have a lot of time, so I just want to be respectful of your time. But given you talk about Silicon Valley, for AI, that's one of the things people you hear get very worried about. They hear AI is going to come after your jobs. What can you say? Because is it going to be something AI is going to take your jobs, or if you learn AI, you can maybe even get a better job yourself? Is there anything you could share for people who are concerned?
I guess I would say a couple of things.
Mhm.
One, I think if you're in any kind of knowledge work capacity whatsoever, you should be thinking about how is AI gonna help
Mhm.
do parts or significant parts of that job. I think about it. Um, and so I think and it's happening today. If you look at the role of a software developer, it's wildly different than it was a few years ago. you know, Software developers today largely aren't doing the work at all that they used to do.
Mhm.
Like they're basically just telling the copilot to do that job. Now, what is that resulting in? It's not resulting in less software. I'll tell you that much. It's resulting in more software being produced more productively by those individuals. And so the impact you can have if you're on the front foot, if you harness the
Mhm.
technology, is enormous. And by the way, that's not just a software engineer, that goes for a salesperson who can now use AI to automate a lot of their outreach, a lot of their research, a lot of their analysis and training, a lot of their pipeline forecasting. Like so many parts of the job that used to be manual are now augmented by these AI tools. And so the question isn't, are they going to impact parts of your job? But the question is, are you going to be impacted by them? Or are you going to be in the forefront and helping to lead it? And I think for the people that are paying attention and learning these skills and learning how to harness these skills, what you see is that they're more productive,
Mhm.
not that they're like finding themselves replaced necessarily by those tools.
That's comforting. That's good because, as you can imagine, especially if you're in between jobs, you're worried about. If you have a job, you're worried about. So this could alleviate some concerns. Here's,
It's like any technology is going to be disruptive.
yeah.
And so, I mean, look, there will be jobs that are very much impacted by AI, just like there have been with every technology that's come out since the wheel. Um, and that's not to dismiss it, that's real. And if you're one of those jobs, I'll give you an example. I read a story that demonstrated some legal analysis being done by AI, that there was, people employed reviewing contracts and identifying, does the contract have these specific terms in it? And if so, calling that out in the data.
Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect job for AI. And so it turns out AI can do that 99.97 times more accurately and faster. And so if you had that job, you probably don't have that job anymore. And so that can really be disruptive. And it does mean that you need to upskill yourself and find other areas. So I don't want to dismiss that. Like it truly can be something that
Mhm.
that can cause you to need to change your job or overtake job that you used to be able to do. But at the same time, I think it's creating more opportunity at the same time as it's taking other things away.
That's awesome. Anything that I didn't ask you that you feel that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I think we
Yeah.
I hit on the big
Okay.
things that are on my mind, which is just really like the soul crushing nature of today's job market, and some of the optimistic and hopeful things that we're trying to do about it, and some of the practical things that if I'm a job seeker today, I can be doing about it as well. So yeah, that was a great conversation.
By the way, what's strong yes with the hat? What's going on? I see that on your LinkedIn,
It's a
flow.
thing, right?
What is that?
So
I'm trying to
so
figure out what is
right,
that. Yeah.
famously in Greenhouse, if
Yeah.
you evaluate a candidate,
Uh-huh.
you can do it, you do it along sort of the spectrum from
Mhm.
definitely not to strong yes.
Okay. Okay.
And so it's always a fun thing when you're interviewing someone and the interview's going really well.
Yeah.
If you've used Greenhouse, you know that feeling where you're like, oh, this one's a strong yes. And so it's always really fun at the end to mash that dark green button and submit it, and everyone feels great about it. And so we thought, let's capture a little bit of that feeling and put it on some swag. But
Yeah, it was cool because I see with the little caps on with the strong yes. I was like, I'm trying. Wait, what is that?
it's the positive feeling when you meet that great
Awesome.
talent, and you just know your team's going to get better. And so we thought we'd put that on a hat.
Well, Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time because there's so many, dude, I'm telling you, there's so many people. And I know you know this, but I think the audience needs to hear it again and again. It's so many people are so frustrated, worried, scared, and understandably so.
Yeah.
So you're able to, in a nuanced way, in a calm way, explaining how these things work, what's happening. It's not just you, it's going across the board, how you can network with people, to get a job, and just laying out and why some things just are kablooey, things like, in giving
Yep.
what goes behind the scenes, that again, it's not you, this is what's going on behind the scenes, why maybe it's a little bit more challenging. And this way it doesn't hurt you so much. It can be frustrating, but at least okay, it's not me, this is just the system, and we just got to work its way through and understand. And in a way, I think that helps people mentally to feel, oh, okay, so I can do it. There's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of obstacles, but they're going to be, we could overcome them and I can get that new job.
I hope so.
So this is really great. And I think much needed. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts on it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
It's a great conversation. Bye.